Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of 219 GreenConnect, where we explore topics about the environment and green living in Northwest Indiana. For past show archives, news, and upcoming events, you can check out our website at 219greenconnect.com or connect with us on Facebook or Twitter. You can also subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Listeners to our live show today can phone in at 805-243-1323 to post questions or join us on the live call. I'm your host, Kathy Sipple, and with me today I have Jim Erdelac. He is Education and Volunteer Manager at the Shirley Heinze Land Trust. Welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about our land trust and the great things that we accomplish with volunteer help.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to hear about this topic because I know a couple of people who have joined up as volunteers for Shirley Heinze Land Trust, and they got a lot out of it. And it sounds like you've got quite a few different programs. So give us a little background about Shirley Heinze for people who might not be familiar with the organization, and then also just a little bit about yourself.
Well, Shirley Heinze Land Trust is a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 1981 to preserve and protect and restore the valuable natural habitats found in the Indiana Dunes region. Shirley Heinze herself was a doctor and a psychologist, and she lived in the Beverly Shores area and was a very strong advocate for preservation of the Indiana Dunes, and that was truly her passion. And she passed away at a fairly early age in life. She was 53 years old when she passed away, and a group of her friends wanted to see her passion for preserving and protecting natural areas continue under a legacy. So they actually got together a $30,000 endowment to start the organization in her name. The organization grew fairly slowly initially, and then we were gifted a very large donation of stock that turned out to be quite lucrative, and that was kind of when the organization began to grow, and honestly it's grown by leaps and bounds from there. We're now an organization that has 7 employees, 5 of which are full-time, and we still have a very, very large board of directors and advisory council that we can go to on any matters that we have that we need assistance on, or if we need opinion of a professional. We have an extremely diverse board of directors that we can go to for just about everything that we need. Our organization, our main operating area is within Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties in northwest Indiana. In that area, we protect and preserve every type of natural habitat that can be found in northwest Indiana, ranging from globally rare dune and swale habitat in Gary all the way to boreal flatwoods habitat in Michigan City and everything in between. So we try to protect everything that is the natural heritage of Indiana. We own approximately 1,200 acres outright. We also have a few conservation easements, but our main focus is purchasing property solely through a straight up land purchase. That way, if we are the fee simple owners of the property, there's far less restriction on how we can manage it and how we restore it, because that is the primary focus for us. We are obviously well vested in preserving natural areas, but we also want to see them restored to as close as we can get of pre-settlement conditions, meaning we're trying to do everything that we can do to return a property what it was before the influence of people really started to change the property. And each property is different, of course, and it has its own limitations. So, like I said, we try to get as close to that as we can, but we can never be exact,
Gotcha. And so you said 1,200 acres is how many?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
so
and about 15 different nature preserves throughout the area.
Okay.
And all these preserves are open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So we use volunteer help on our nature preserves, but also in the day-to-day runnings of our organization. Before I get into kind of the getting your hands dirty type of volunteerism, I want to first talk about our board of directors and our advisory council. We do not track the number of hours that they donate to the organization. If we were to do so, it would be an absolutely astronomical number. We have just an incredibly great group of folks that are really invested in this organization and want to see it continue to grow and continue to get to the next level. So these people, most of them have full-time jobs, and they do so much for their organization. It's really hard to put into words.
Well, I definitely recognize some of the names on your list on your website, which we probably should mention just in case anybody wants to check out any of the things that we're talking about. The website is www.heinzetrust.org, and that's HeinzeTrust.org. And from there, you can also click on their Facebook or YouTube if you'd like to check out what they're doing on those sites. I definitely see some names that I recognize from my involvement with Green Drinks, which is a monthly meetup that we do in Valparaiso each month. And just, in general, they're in the news quite a lot. So I'm sure these people do keep very busy.
That they do. And so, too, do our volunteers that assist with restoration work on the nature preserves. And we try to give volunteers a little bit of what the entire spectrum of land management is. So they not only help us with restoration projects, they also help us maintain trails, construct boardwalks and bridges, do exotic species control work, collect seed from native plants to be used for restoration projects. And we also let them do fun stuff, too, like frog monitoring, vegetation sampling, and we have a strong core of folks that's highly dedicated to our Mighty Acorns environmental education program.
Now, I got a question for you with the frog monitoring. First of all, I want to know what that is, but second of all, I've been on the beach up at Lake Michigan a few times, not many, but a couple of times where I've actually seen a frog right on the beach, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. Yeah.
That would surprise me too.
Okay. So it wasn't just me. Yeah, I've seen other people even posted on Facebook that they had seen frogs on the beach at Miller. I was at the state park when I happened to see it. But tell me a little bit, what is frog monitoring and why is that important for what you do?
So frog monitoring is something that takes place in the springtime. What we do is we do a workshop in February, and folks can find the date for that workshop. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but that date for the workshop will be on our volunteer blogspot webpage, which is www.Shirley Heinze, and Heinze again is HEINZE, .blogspot.com. So in February we have a workshop. We invite folks from all over the region that want to participate in frog monitoring. We have a lot of really good folks that we've made connections with through the years, and one of those is Dr. Alan Resitar. He is a herpetologist at the Field Museum and has an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to amphibians and reptiles. Alan will lead the frog monitoring workshop for us. We go through each species of frog that's native to the area. We listen to their calls. We learn more about their habitat requirements and kind of where their niche is in the ecological systems. And we then kind of break folks up and assign them to preserves or natural areas that are near their home to monitor. The monitoring itself is relatively simple and doesn't require a large amount of time investment. There's 3 monitoring periods, one in early spring, one kind of mid-spring, and then one towards late spring, early summer. And these 3 different periods are designed to different frog species are out and highly active at different times during the season. So these 3 periods are broken up to focus on trying to get the whole spectrum of the different species of frogs that are using those wetland areas. So folks will go out, and the monitoring itself generally takes about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the size of your site and how many different monitoring stations you can have at your site. So what we do is we give folks a brochure or pamphlet that has the different requirements that they need to write down, like what were the weather conditions that day, what is the temperature. All of these things will affect the rate at which frogs are calling and the intensity.
Okay.
So depending on the weather, we can kind of get an idea of whether that really is, a prime time for those frogs to be calling, or whether it's kind of marginal. Maybe it's a little too cool that day, so you're not going to hear a lot of frog activity. So it's
Can I back up a second? I would like to ask you just a little bit about, I like frogs. I've liked them since I was little. But what does the presence or the number of frogs, in a particular ecosystem tell us? Does it tell us something about the health of that system, or, why is it important for you to monitor it?
That's a fantastic question. Frogs are what we call an indicator species. Frogs and amphibians, they don't actually drink water in the sense that most other organisms do. They will actually absorb the water through their very porous skin and through their cloaca. So to have a high number of frogs and frog species in a wetland, it's a direct indicator on whether that is a healthy wetland or not, because if there is water pollution, it's simply the frogs will not be able to live there because of that very interesting physical feature that they have.
Okay. I don't think I ever knew that they don't drink water, they absorb it. Very interesting. And how would you say we're trending here in Northwest Indiana? How is the frog population doing vis-a-vis whatever we started tracking?
Yeah, not being a herpetologist myself, it's really difficult for me to be able to say. And I've only been involved in the frog monitoring process for 3 years now.
Okay.
So I really don't have enough time invested to see any trends at this point. But what I can say is there's a lot of great organizations in Northwest Indiana that are doing habitat restoration, groups from small nonprofits like ourselves all the way up through, state and government entities. And everyone is doing a high amount of wetland restoration. And in the future, the optimist in me wants to say that we're going to continue to see better habitat, and because of that, more amphibians. So it's, like I said, I don't have quite enough time invested to really see those trends yet.
That's okay. It's a subject for a future episode, perhaps. But I find that every single thing a guest shares, it usually leads to 5 more questions that I have. So I appreciate your answer. And if you're just joining us, this is your host Kathy Sipple, and this is 219 GreenConnect. With me today, I have Jim Erdelac, and we're talking about how important volunteers are to his organization, the Shirley Heinze Land Trust. And so frog monitoring is one big thing. You've mentioned quite a few other programs. Mighty Acorns, I think, was discussed on an earlier show, but I'd like to know more about that.
Sure. So the Mighty Acorns program is an environmental education program designed for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students. And the great thing about this program is it actually involves students in restoration work. It allows them to get out into the field and get their hands dirty and to really experience, what natural areas are and the management requirements that they need and how we can, increase the quality of these habitats for the plants and the animals that live there. And, all this stuff is directly affects people because these are the things that support us. So our main focus as an organization historically has been preservation and restoration. Education has always been an aspect of our mission, and it's one that we've accomplished in the past through guided hikes, workshops, things like frog monitoring, involving citizen scientists to get out on our properties and educate themselves at the same time as doing habitat restoration. 4 years ago, we decided that we wanted to take a little bit different tact when it comes to environmental education. We heard about this program that was developed in partnership between the Nature Conservancy and the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, and it has a highly successful reputation in Illinois. And we got together with folks from the Field Museum and the Indiana Dunes Learning Center and formed a partnership for the Mighty Acorns program with Northwest Indiana. Shirley Heinze Land Trust has been fortunate enough to kind of take the lead role in this partnership and began doing the Mighty Acorns program 4 years ago. We started off with Hobart Township Schools, and it was a no-brainer for us to start with them because we have one elementary school in Hobart called Ridgeview Elementary that is directly adjacent to our 74-acre Gordon and Faith Greiner Nature Preserve, which is a mosaic of several different habitats from sand dune to stepped graminoid fen to wet mesic woods and all the way to ag field that's been restored to prairie. So these students come out 3 times a year to their adopted nature preserve. During each time of the year, we involve them in different restoration activities and as well as educational activities. And they also have some time called free exploration to where they're oversaw by their teachers and they receive a little bit of direction, but for the most part, they're able to just explore the area, find things that interest them, and just get immersed in the natural areas. Because in today's day and age of cell phones, internet, computers, social media, video games, kids today they don't have the same childhood that we did when we were growing up. I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate. We spent a lot of time growing up outside, playing, getting dirty, and developing a relationship with the natural world. Well, today's kids are simply not exposed to that. They spend the majority of their time, indoors and connected to electronic media. And the whole thing with our organization getting involved in the Mighty Acorns program is we saw this trend, and we realized that if we do not allow these students to develop a relationship with the natural world, when they grow up, they're simply not going to appreciate it because they don't understand it. And if that is the case, then we're going to watch our work basically cease. So if we want to see our work of preservation and restoration continue into the future, we have to get the next generation involved. It's that simple.
So planting the seed of that that mindset very early on. Yeah,
Exactly.
I remember as a kid getting that, I think it was a magazine from the National Wildlife Federation called Ranger Rick. I don't know if that's still around, but that was my favorite magazine as a kid. And even though we lived in kind of a normal, subdivision, we didn't have a lot of, woods or all the kind of interesting outdoor ecosystems that you just mentioned. It at least made you aware that these things existed, and I looked for every kind of thing like that in our own yard or whenever I was outside. So I think you're right. If you plant that early, it definitely informs your whole life and the way you look at the world.
Mm-hmm.
So very cool.
And we try to I touched on before, they come out to our nature preserves 3 times during the school year. And with those trips, we try to give them the full picture of what restoration work is. So in the fall, our stewardship activity is collecting seeds from native plant species.
Mm-hmm.
In the wintertime, we actually give students loppers and little bow saws and have them remove exotic shrubs like bush honeysuckle and autumn olive and other woody things like oriental bittersweet. We then, after the students leave, our staff will come back with herbicide to treat those cut stumps, mm-hmm. because that's a process that simply has to be done. If you do not treat those stumps, they'll simply sucker and send out new shoots the next growing season. So after the students leave, our staff will treat those stumps with herbicide. We will then take that seed that they collect in the fall and disperse it in that area. Over the wintertime, the freeze and thaw cycles will kind of push that seed down in the soil. And when they come back for their final field trip in the springtime, they then see all these native plants that have germinated and begun to grow and recolonizing an area that was an exotic species monoculture not more than a year before. So we really try and give them that full picture, that big picture of what restoration work is, and allow them to see the fruits of their labor. And I tell you, it's amazing when you can watch a student go from kind of a detached onlooker to someone that you know in the future is going to be hands-on and involved in environmental restoration. And a lot of kids, that's all it really takes is a little bit of exposure for them to mm-hmm. really start to develop that appreciation. And like you said, that seed then begins to grow.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. And just if anybody's curious about some of these programs or where you can get more information, I'll just like to repeat the website one more time. Shirley Heinze Land Trust is our guest, Jim Erdelac from the Shirley Heinze Land Trust, I should say. And the website is www.heinzetrust.org. That is HEINZETRUST.org. And even the volunteer blog that you mentioned, I believe that's accessible through your website as well. If you go to the volunteer tab, you can find out all kinds of volunteer information and programs and such. Well, that sounds like 2 amazing programs right there, and I know you mentioned several others that you were very excited to share. We probably have time for one more. Did you want to talk about the CSI initiative, or was it Calumet Stewardship Initiative? Is that the correct name?
Sure. Yes, the Calumet Stewardship Initiative, of which Shirley Heinze is a member organization. It has over 27 member organizations in the Chicagoland area. It's a fantastic organization that was developed to kind of interconnect all these great organizations that are doing this type of work in the Calumet region. And I say Calumet, that region encompasses Chicago, all of northwest Indiana, and even reaches into southern Michigan. So this organization, like I said, they've been doing great work for a long time, connecting these different organizations and helping us to work together to a common goal. Well, this year they decided to conduct a program for volunteer leadership training, and it's something that the region has really been lacking for quite a while. We constantly have a lot of interested folks that want to volunteer for these organizations, and it's difficult for land managers of the organization to, lead as many volunteer work days as we really can. So this training program was focused on training volunteers to lead volunteer work days.
Great.
So, yeah, it was really great, and there were a total of, I believe, 16 participants that went through this training program. It occurred once a month throughout the summer for 5 months straight, and at each training session, they would go to a different natural area, be educated by the land managers of that area, and each thing would focus on a different aspect of leading a volunteer workday. From being able to, connect with volunteers and communicate the goals, all the way through to actually handing out tasks for volunteers and leading the workday, and basically giving us another option to where we can do more volunteer work days, and we don't have to involve the actual land managers. Once these people are trained, they can be the leaders, and they can take that role. So we were fortunate enough to host one of these volunteer programs at Gordon Faith Griner Nature Preserve in Hobart, and that is also the property located adjacent to Ridgeview Elementary School. This was also the final training session in the program. So after folks learned about natural areas management, mostly exotic species control from our staff, we then had an award ceremony, and the 16 graduates received certificates, and they are now leading volunteer work days throughout the Chicagoland area.
That's great. What a great success story. And it sounds like you really need that to keep growing the number of acres and the number of nature preserves that you're managing. With 1,200 acres, that's a lot of potential restoration work that needs to be done. It
certainly is. And we're adding acreage all the time, and we're not adding employees. So
Right. Makes sense. Well, is there a typical volunteer that shows up for that type of program, or do they come from any particular background, or have you had, a wide variety?
That's the interesting thing is there is a very wide variety of folks that come out to do restoration work. I mean, there's the folks that you would expect, the people that are into science and, have been exposed to it before and just enjoy doing that type of work. But we also have folks come out that, work in industry, steel workers, people that work for, big corporations like BP. It's really great to see a big diversity of people come out and be interested in land restoration.
Well, that's a really great story, and it sounds like an opportunity that many listeners might want to explore and enjoy. Will you be continuing that program next year?
I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I don't believe the program will be going next year. It was one of these things that was a partnership of many different organizations.
Gotcha.
And it was funded by grant funding, and that cycle has ended. And I don't know if the organization has applied for future funding for that project.
Gotcha.
If not next year, it will definitely occur again in the future because it was highly successful.
Good. Well, I know we're almost out of time, but this has been very informative, and I want to thank my guest, Jim Erdelac from the Shirley Heinze Land Trust, for sharing with us the importance of all the work that they're doing and for taking time to give credit to their wonderful volunteers. It sounds like there would be no way to get all this work done without them, and really appreciate the update. So I'd like to have you back again sometime, Jim. And again, this is Kathy Sipple, and this has been another episode of 219 GreenConnect. You can find past archives on our website, 219greenconnect.com. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Kathy.